YouTube doesn't want to work. There we go. Okay, it's working. Um, alright, I don't need to stare at this. So right now, I'm not as prepared for this as I was hoping I'd be because today ended up being a bit of a scramble. But this week is going to be essentially me rushing things about before I disappear off. And this wasn't essentially, well, I mean, there was discussions that need to be made on both sides because, of course, we're against both sides in the Ukraine conflict. We don't like Russia, we don't like America and what they're operating here. But this specific topic itself was incited by a third world comrade, a Lebanese brother, and you know what was put into position is this sort of very straightforward. People of the third world are rightfully disgusted right now in countries that have been in and out invaded over the last God knows how many fucking decades. That now what we're seeing is because it's Europe that's being invaded and treated like this, and it's not the US or the UK or France or Germany or Spain that's doing it. That the Anglosphere and the other encountering imperialist powers have very much threw a hissy fit. I mean, we're seeing fucking, the same people who outright throw their support into the same basket as as they'll throw their basket in support throw their support in the basket with Israel like that whenever it comes to the Palestinian conflict. But when it comes to the Russia invasion of Ukraine, they're not taking the stance that Abby Martin took, where she's against the Ukrainian government, she's against the US, she's against Russia, and she's for the Ukrainian people. The right position to take. These people are compounding themselves into, the NATO imperialist mentality. It's football fans waving Palestinian flags get fined. Yeah, absolutely. Yet we're seeing people wave Ukraine flags all over the place. As much as I'm against the Russian invasion, the Ukrainian government's a fucking Nazi government. Like, Palestine isn't ran by fucking Nazis. No, it's ran by fucking the freedom fighters. Condi, the not so lovely African American that aided Bush. I don't recognize the name Condi. She is saying invading a sovereign country is a war crime, but Ukraine isn't a sovereign country. It's literally in a civil war, which would mean it's not sovereign. It's still illegal to just invade a country, but Condoleezza Rice, I see. Not used to all the shortifications of these names. I can't spell her name. I can't pronounce her name, so we're at we're at an off end here. Does it give a nice tacky feel that I can't be asked to resize the fucking webcam to be a rectangle? It's a square. It doesn't even properly cover the bottom. I hope it's annoying people as much as it's annoying me. But it is an absolute insult. This isn't the first time this has happened. Where this utter, insult is thrown into the face of Palestinian girl today had a flashbang thrown in her face. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, by the IDF, I imagine. She's hearing impaired. What, before the flashbang or like because of it? Another girl was beaten by Israeli security because people were out celebrating a holiday. Every time there's a holiday, they kill people or they attack people before the flashbang. Fucking hell, man. It's not how you. I'd say it's not how you treat disabled people. It's just not how you treat people in general. Flashbangs against civilians is. I mean, I know legalism is something I couldn't give a shit about, but for all the stuff that the US goes on about war crime this, war crime that, it is a fucking crime to use a flashbang out of out of fucking military use. Fucking police don't go. Armed police don't go bombing in with flashbangs. And you know what? They do this with fucking actual bullets and fucking peaceful protesters as well. So this isn't too short of them. But I I don't know if anyone's ever spoken to a military serviceman who has experienced a flashbang going off, but I have. You do not want to experience a flashbang going off. They are not very pleasant devices. They are, and that's putting it lightly. I'd rather be hit with a white phosphorus smoke grenade. That's my response to being told how fucking horrible it is being struck by a flashbang. Because at least the white phosphorus smoke grenade just burns a bit. It's irritatingly warm. It's not blinding light with a horrible concussive sound. It makes you feel like you've just been smacked by a brick. Dubbed her a strong Ukrainian. They used footage of Ahed Tamimi as a kid standing up to the IDF. Dubbed her a strong Ukrainian girl. Ahed Ahed is now a young woman, and she is Palestinian. How the fuck are they getting away with that? Like, do the Ukrainians think they're Arabs now? Because I mean, there was the Ukrainian ISIS flags, like fucking what was it, like 4 years ago? Ukrainian ISIS is back. Will Ukrainian ISIS be countered by fucking because it's the West? Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the Nazis were on record for being like the most racist people ever, but they indulged in shit that was against their own thing because it pushed their own stuff. The West will always push its own barriers whenever it suits it. By the way, here's a link about what he had to say. Um, Sorry, I got a message. Sorry. By the way, here's a link about what they had to say. You will have to send me the link because I think YouTube deletes links because it's a cunt. Because I can't see it. You have to send it me through Discord. Igualmente. Okay. Okay. Willkommen. How do I? Is it F11? No, that just full screens that. How do I set it into streamer mode? Um, DSGT. There we go. Yes. Oh shit. Ah, you bastard. Technical difficulties. Okay, I was hoping not. Like, no. Statement in response to coverage of war in Ukraine. February 2022, the Arab and Middle Eastern Journalists Association calls on all news organizations to be mindful of implicit and explicit bias in their coverage of war in Ukraine. In only the last few days, we have tracked examples of racist news coverage that ascribes the more importance to some victims of war over others. On February 26th, during a CBS News segment, correspondent Charlie Diagata commented, quote, "But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized," that's a fucking hard word to be using, very racist, relatively European. Ooh, I have to choose those words carefully too. City, one where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen. Fucking hell. All due respect. Where was the respect? Next. Daniel Hannon of The Telegraph wrote, quote, "They seem so like us. That is what makes it so shocking." Jesus Christ. War is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote populations. It can happen to anyone. Oh my god. This is some proper imperial Anglospheric shit right now. Al Jazeera English anchor Peter Dobby said, quote, "What's compelling is just looking at them. The way they are the way they are dressed, these are prosperous. I am loath to use the expression middle class people. These are not obviously refugees looking to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to." If you see them as like a family that's normal to you, but you don't see people from the Middle East or North Africa like that, you are a racist. There's nothing for it but a racist. If you don't see your common people, humanity, when you look around the world, other than when people have a similar color of skin, and they come from a similar continent, you are a racist. These people don't look down on us like we're lesser beings. They look down on us because we treat them like shit and genocide, commit genocides across the globe, ransack their countries for their resources. Um, we are not talking here about Syrians fleeing the bombing of the Syrian regime backed by Putin. We're talking about Europeans leaving in cars that look like ours to save their lives. Philip Korb of BFM TV reported. I will have you know that people in the Middle East are aware of what cars are. They do sometimes even own cars and drive them to places. Now, why might you not be able to, as a refugee, you're trying to get away as quick as possible, not drive to France from Syria or drive to Germany from Syria? I don't know if people know this, but you literally have to travel so far around that the cost in petrol would cost more than it would to get your entire family on a boat out of there. Boats exist. This is pure fucking racism. Arabs have no cars, yet still road traffic. I mean, I've watched Top Gear. Not the most racially friendly of people, but I've watched Top Gear drive around the Middle East, and not only do they drive around where there are plenty of cars, but they get stuck in sometimes 3 hour, 4 hour long traffic jams in some places. Same as when they've been in North Africa. It's almost as if people need vehicles to do certain commutes, especially in imperialized societies where industry is even more concentrated and centered around where resources are and where produced product has to go. Imperialists don't give a shit about anything in between. No, fam, it's not cars. It's just people stood there, isn't it? Bamboozled again. Oh, yeah, because they didn't even go by boats. That's what it is. All the Syrian refugees just walked to Germany. they just all walked, but they didn't walk like across the fields or anything like that. They followed the roads because it's like Roman roads. They're built for horses and carts, um, and people. Yeah, but they didn't walk all the way to Germany. Like, I mean, even at that point, you'd still drive. Once they went off the boats. How do you know that they didn't get provided free segways from all the German governments? It's like they all come here. They get free segways, houses before everyone, Burger King, free Burger King vouchers. Angela Merkel gives them a free handshake when they get off the boat. See, that one would have made my German friends laugh at the end. And don't think they're here. Cry. Uh, um, they walked across borders, got chased, attacked. By the way, Merkel got robbed in a store. Loses chancellorship of Germany, gets robbed next day. She's a commoner now, you see. So she's not got the protection of the Gestapo. I mean, the definitely not Gestapo. I mean, they still call the Presidium of Government the Reichstag, which roughly translates to like imperial center. Like Reich is an imperial term. It's every specific Reich, first, second, third, have all been risings of empires, all wanting to be the last one. The AMEJA condemns and categorically rejects Orientalist and racist implications that any population or country is quote uncivilized end quote. Absolutely, sing it loud, sing it clear. Or bears economic factors that make it worthy of conflict. This type of commentary reflects the pervasive mentality in Western journalism of normalizing tragedy in parts of the world such as the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. It dehumanizes and renders that I don't like the term Latin America. It's called South America. It's a bit ignorant of the native population. It dehumanizes and renders their their experience with war as somehow normal and expected. And I mean, it also puts their pleas for ending war as something that is dehumanized too. I mean, it utterly dehumanizes the anti-war movement of Arabia and Africa, which realistically speaking are the two places that have been hit by war the most in the last 20 years. Well, in the last 20 years, I think that I think it's like 80 or 90% of conflicts have occurred within Africa and the Middle East in the last 30 years. There's been a couple in South Asia, and there's been I don't think there's been anything in South America, maybe. And I know that there's been obviously the Yugoslav conflict in Europe and now the Ukraine one. But otherwise, it has been Anglo-Imperialism within Western Asia and um, North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa as well, sorry. Um, oh, shit. Newsrooms must not make comparisons that weigh the significance or imply justification of one conflict over another. Civilian casualties and displacement in other countries are equally as abhorrent as they are in Ukraine. Absolutely. The AMEJA stands in full solidarity with all civilians under military assault in any part of the world. Absolutely. And we deplore the difference in news coverage of people in one country versus another. Not only can such coverage decontextualize conflicts, but it contributes to the erasure of populations around the world who continue to experience violent occupations and aggression. Um, oh, it's not letting me scroll. Why won't it let me scroll? Is there a way that I can force it downwards? I managed to get it to scroll before. What the fuck? I'm gonna have to load this up on Chrome. Um, remove. Yes. Chrome. Um, I don't want to do that. Uh, display capture. Okay. No, I don't want to do a display. I want to do an application. Retard. Window. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot. Unblocked. Um, It doesn't want to detect fucking what's it? It won't detect incognito tabs. I've got to get smart with this now. Um, guest. Remove. Yes. Add window capture. Good luck. I need it with this fucking thing. Oh, no. It's not what I want. Are you actually taking the piss? Why are you being like this? fuck's sake. I don't know when it stopped working now. But yeah, the fucking the the pieces get into correctly there the apparent racism and double standards of the Anglosphere and of Eurocentric imperialism. That as soon as it hits their own shores, it's a different kettle of fish. We saw these same behaviors from the West during World War II. How astonished they were that the Nazis were doing to their art what we were doing with the art of the third world, that we were stealing their art and we were stealing their culture and we were destroying what we didn't like and kept what we did. Not left them what we didn't like. We outright destroyed what we didn't like. And by take what we did, we took it without leaving them any grace behind. The Nazis weren't even that bad to us compared to what we were to the fucking to the rest of the world. Like they were just as bad as that to the Jews and to the Slavs, but to Anglo-Saxons, French, to Italians, to Germans, to this that Nazis were nowhere near as bad as what's it the uh the way that the way they treated us compared to how we've treated the third world. Um, I wicked. Do you have any further past 5? Because the tweet only stops at 5. Um, I got through that one. I got through that one. Although my mic might have stopped working for this one. In order to prevent such explicit bias, we call on the newsrooms to train correspondents on the cultural and political nuances of regions they're reporting on, and not rely on American or Eurocentric biases. Inaccurate and disingenuous comparisons only serve to inflame stereotypes and mislead viewers. They ultimately perpetuate prejudicial responses to political and humanitarian crises. Yeah, it says 5 of 9, but there's no further. Um, okay, there we go. Oh, it doesn't actually. Oh no, it does end at that point. It just says 5 of 9 for no reason. Someone must maybe they meant to say 5 of 5 and they wrote a 9. That seems like something I could do. I'm running the stream in the background on YouTube, and my computer, to save bandwidth, is running it at 144p. And because of how small I've got the picture of me, I am literally blurred. I am not a visible creature. Um, I didn't know you could even load videos at 144p, but anymore. I thought they removed that feature, but I I guess um I guess not. But I mean, this is coming from like a journalist agency. this is them writing with profession. If we're to put the professionalism out the window for a second, what they're essentially pointing out here is absolute pure fucking racism. That's what's being seen here. There's no fucking doubt about it. The people were like literally outspokenly turned around and said, oh, it's not the same as when it's a load of brown people who are being bombed. It's white people being bombed. That's literally what they turned around and said. Pure ignorance. Yeah, I did look at it, and it ends at what is 5 of 9. So what I'm saying is that whoever numbered it wrong, because there are only 5 of 5. It ends at the end point of the 5th picture, but it says 5 of 9. I can't remember how to say the word, but it's the number dyslexia. Being an American. That's what numberlexia is, because they're really bad at math, and they only call it math. They don't call it maths, so they only know the one math. Which is 2 plus 2 is 3. But number jumbo. But what's going on in here? This is the same shit we saw with the Nazis during World War II, because it's European, and there's this we have the humanist viewpoint of civility and civilization, denominating to one's perceived humanity. So this idea of being civilized or uncivilized, which there's a reason why the fucking the Arabian journalists are absolutely opposed to this idea of like there being a level of economic prosperity that would denounce one as civilized or uncivilized. Does it need to be force fed to people? Like it's quite literally 19th century colonial bullshit. Like this perceived idea of civilization, which is then used to justify this idea of humanity, denominating being human as a relativity between civilization and intelligence, which is what intellectualism on top of Victorian humanism compounds, that it then comes to this perspective of white supremacy. They are looking to the nation. Mind you, Ukraine is not an economically prosperous nation. It hasn't been for a long time. They've been going through fucking crises non-stop since the end of the Soviet Union. And their economy is in the shitter. They barely have running water in most cities for the year straight. The hot water is on and off for sometimes only a matter of a couple of months a year altogether that it's on. They are semi-civilized is basically nations you can work with using separate individual treaties, like Persia. Civilized nations, aka Europe, having an international relations system. Then you have non-civilized, the brown country. They are free to take and civilize how Euros see fit. Well, I mean, given the way that Britain still likes to gloat about it civilizing the world, I imagine it'll come through the process of being manhandled by Europe and these people being told how to civilize themselves. I must remind Europe that Iraq has the long-standing nickname, the cradle of civilization. Maybe they should learn where civilization has historically came from. It was not Europe. It was Africa, and it was West Asia. but this modern idea of what denotes civilization is predicated around Victorian humanism. This idea of civilized coming from the right makes right. Might makes right. Um, and the intellectualism of Roosevelt's period, which is an adaptation on Victorian humanism, which then prescribes um, intelligence as a way of applying one's civilization as well. Intelligence, that very weak and hard to thing to measure. Fuck me, I'm more stupid than I am smart, and everyone gives me more bone than I'm worth a biscuit. Um, the Yeah, they condescend to us. It's this perceived element of intelligence, because the one thing that they are, one thing you will give to the imperialists of the north, both east, both west, is that they're very intelligent when it comes to oppression, because that's where all their intelligence is compounded. Don't matter how smart you think you are, if all you're smart at is oppressing the world and using it to fuel your crazy pot air brain schemes, where 90%, where fucking most of the shit that you fucking create is stolen. Most of the ideas you come up with are stolen, and it's off of the stolen ideas of black, brown, and red-skinned people that they end up forming some of their greatest ideals. I mean, some of the greatest breakthroughs in medicine, science, in public and social constructure has come from foreigners. I mean, a lot of British infrastructure was developed by Polish people. A lot of infrastructure ideas at the post-World War II was developed by Polish people. There's been massive Iraqi and Egyptian influences on British society and British culture. There's been massive Jamaican influences on the way in which we've dealt with our society and our culture. And all of these people have come up with their own inventions and incantations. I mean, with the imperialists, it's multiculturalism so long as it suits them. I mean, Roosevelt's multiculturalism was just, let's make more than Anglo-Saxons be accepted as white. Way of incorporating people in. But I'm talking the modern conception, where it's this, we will allow inclusion of people so long as they act European and that they contribute any ideas that they might have to the system at hand. Art as well, yeah, art is absolutely stolen left, right, and center. And it's not to say that fucking we need to fucking do these things. Like, I'm not trying to do the fetishism thing where I'm saying that, like, oh, it's so fucking amazing that we ended up stealing it, because it's as amazing as anything that comes from humanity at its pure capacity to experience art, culture, science. These are all things that we can exuberate, but it's the factor that we have the capacity, as anyone else has the capacity, to use our brains, apply it, and think it, but we choose to steal instead. Rather than work together with people of the world, we steal from people of the world. We cap development because, I mean, you know, they always go on about the old saying about how many Einsteins die in the street in our own country. How many Einsteins have we bombed in the last fucking, 100 years that we've had planes flying in the sky dropping bombs on people? How many people have we bombed? They could have invented the next great machine. They could have invented the next great social idea. They could have come up with the new great plan of the future. How many people who were freedom fighters, who could have achieved peace in our time, that we have killed? It's an old colonial practice, that is, to eliminate anyone of intelligentsic or aristocratic position. anyone that doesn't side with you. Um, I mean, with modern imperialism, aristocracies aren't as targeted as they were back in the feudal era, but they do target intelligentsia. They try and extract them out as much as possible with imperialist practices, and when they've got as much as they can, they'll kill the rest. Only those that side with them get to survive. And even that is only on the deal that they sell out their own people. And as you say, murdered, yes. From scientists to uni professors, absolutely. Um, it's quite interesting that the backbone of modern science is Islamic mysticism as well. Sort of a big copy wobble in the white supremacal idea of science. It's very British of me to just have a glass of squash that looks like piss. I will confirm it is squash. Reminds me of when the dictatorship here, we had the night of the pencils, where the police military raided schools and universities and so on, with a lot of people being kidnapped and some never seen again. Yeah, and we all know that typically when not seen again in Argentina at that time, you were fucking either off to a camp or you were getting buried in the middle of the woods with a big pile of bodies. Oh, I mean, fascism and colonialism are very, very similar. They're not the same thing. Well, I mean, fascism will always involve colonialism, I guess, but well, even that might not be entirely true. But nonetheless, fascism and colonialism have a synergy. They're very relative, sorry, they're very related to each other in the way they operate. Um, it almost seems like fascism reutilizes policies that would typically only be reserved for the colonized. I mean, that would be getting into the long history of liberalism and how it tried to export as many of the contradictions that feudalism and early capitalism would exert on its own populace. Um, which even that was only to a relative degree initially. They still punished their population as much as they could for production, but it was nonetheless reduced. Um, Imperialism sort of always looks to, from the liberalism in the imperialist outlook always looks to export as many of its contradictions as it can, whilst also trying to make as much profit as it can within its own region because it has to. Um, uh, so I mean, fascism is fascism always ends up being sort of a particularity where the colonial practices are then utilized on the population directly, either to a specific group within that population or on relatively nearby countries, and you then get this horribly racist idea that crops up where they seem to treat um, they seem to treat that treatment that's being exerted onto them as somehow like abhorrently greatly worse than the treatment of which we exuberate around the world. I mean, think about all the crying France, Britain, and America did about World War II. What were they doing around the world before that war started? What were they doing to everyone else? 1.8 billion people died in the British conquest of India. Like, we're no different. Sure, our genocide wasn't as industrial, but the genocide wasn't being enacted against the Anglo-Saxons or the Frankish. It was being enacted against the Jews, the Slavs, and the Romani, the disabled. Uh, you know, the like what the fuck are these guys on? Um, And no, it doesn't derail. Absolutely on topic completely, my friend. There is 20,000 lost people, of which around 5,000 are confirmed dead, I think. And I think that we know about the numbers only because of Paraguay keeping records of everyone. When your spouts of anguish with Paraguay ends up going in the right direction. Oh, ow. Um, yeah, no, it's absolutely relative to this issue. I mean, Russian. I mean, you've got Russian fascism colliding with Ukrainian fascism. The US obviously is going to have divulged, or should be, given the current political socioeconomic climate, divulging towards fascism or already there. Um, I don't know specifically, but as far as the trends would say, I'd say America is already there. Um, this isn't a conflict between liberalism or fascism. This is fascism against fascism against fascism. Well, I mean, it's not really a three-way, but the Ukraine should be seen as its separate thing. It is a fascist state that needs to be dealt with by Ukrainians, not by Russians, not by Americans. Um, you know, this is a very simple situation. For all the people that are like, from back in the day, they'll be like, yeah, but Saddam was a pretty bad dude. This applies here. This applies here. Everyone that turned around and responded, no, but the US had no right to invade and are now supporting the Ukraine, are the biggest, that are now supporting Russia in this war, are the biggest bunch of hypocrites to have ever hit this earth. Um, Same as the people who defended the US's right to invade uh, Iraq on the same basis and now have a problem with Russia doing the same thing. Hypocrisy. Unless one is to criticize what happened in Iraq, one cannot criticize what is happening in Ukraine. There is to treat these things as like as diametrically different situations because one is in Europe and one is in the Middle East is to completely ignore that these are both imperialist conflicts. Yeah, at least be consistent. Absolutely. Imperialist fascists against imperialized fascism. it's uh, it's typical of people in the oppressor position to lack consistency. They flow with what will best suit their agenda and nothing more, nothing less. It's not Israel. Yeah, I mean, it's Ukraine. Yeah, it's not a settler colonial state. It's you know, regardless of whether it's fascism or not, Ukraine has a right of self determination. Israel doesn't. Iraq had a right of self determination. Palestine has a right of self determination. All these nations do. You know, if same as Donetsk and Luhansk, absolutely. Opportunists might be the word to describe them. Also, assholes might work, but that might be me. It's you know, Donetsk and Luhansk and Ukraine are all people vying for sovereignty in their region, and they can do so within that process is within certain means of how they want to operate. And if if something was to be done about fascism, if that's Russia's angle, they should be doing all they can to get a joint conglomeration to deal with the situation. Just sending in your troops and threatening to nuke, according to MSNBC, I don't know whether it's true or not, but threatening to nuke, because from what they've said, not a good idea. Threatening World War III, regardless, not a good idea. But in general, it is utterly against the right of self-determination of this land to deal with its beef. Fascism in Ukraine should be dealt by the Ukrainians of Donetsk, Luhansk, and fascist Ukraine. Um, you know, the what was I gonna go over this? I had somewhere I wanted to go and I forgot. Um, the I mean, this really does start to compound towards the issues regarding what Vladimir Putin had to say in his speech, which, I mean, um, Darks and Gengeros covered that video that Caleb had done on um on Putin's speech. But Putin did directly state a disregard of the right of self-determination and that he does not believe Ukraine to be a country. That is some pretty fucking staunch and horrible shit to say. But have we not been doing the same thing all throughout the Middle East? I mean, we still do it today with places like the DPRK, um, uh, shit, fucking bad with names. I forgot the name of the place, but it's not recognized by any country. It's landlocked between Moldova and Romania. There are a fair few countries around the world. Palestine, actually, yeah, Palestine isn't recognized. I didn't even think of that. Um, well, I mean, the borders aren't fucking correct at the fucking very least. Um, Borders are supposed to be applied to a treaty that was signed like fucking decades ago, but they seem to have changed explicitly for some unknown reason. It's almost as if settlerism is happening. Settlerism that even the West calls illegal and does nothing to do anything about it. No, I mean, I'm all about fucking squashing Nazis, but I think people must understand that that was literally the logic that people were riding by when they supported the war in Iraq. Saddam Hussein is known as the fascist of Baathism. Well, I'm not. I don't use that war because that war is specifically the war that happened. That it's all the same. I use it because the political like ideology of the governments of Saddam's Iraq it's not Nazi ideation, so it's nowhere near as bad as the Ukrainian government, but they were still fascist socioeconomics, like these, and Saddam was still a fucking douchebag. Fucking my Arab brother would say it quicker than I could. Fucking the but like it was never right to do it with Saddam. How would it be right here? Why is it all of a sudden right now? Do people think that because it's Europe we have a right to manhandle it? Does Europe also do people also think because it's Europe we're allowed to fantasize over these people as if they're drastically somehow more human than the people we've been bombing for fucking 80 years straight? Like, seriously, point a time where there's been peace in the last 80 years. Because I'll tell you now, one day, that's all there has been for peacetime in the last 80 years. One day. Catalonia, maybe. Yeah, Catalonia isn't recognized. Yeah, that's Transnistria is the uh yeah, it's between Moldova, Ukraine, and Romania, but that's not its real name. That's the Romanian name for it. So we have likely pissed off a lot of people. Can't remember what they actually call it. Um, yeah, screw 'em indeed. But it's the double standard. Fucking, and you know what? Like, it's not like fucking for all the hate that any of us would have for fucking Saddam. At least there's like caveats. Like he was he was heavily opposed to the settler colonialism of Israel. He was at least opposed to the U.S. In the region around the time of the 90s. Bit complicated before that, but there's no caveats to Ukraine. But it's still the same biscuit. Like the point I'm trying to get there, and it's sort of sloppily made, is that there shouldn't be a caveat to this. People shouldn't be looking for like a golden ticket in the situation, a way to smooth it out. It's gonna be a hard pill to swallow, and it was with anyone, and it certainly was with Iraq. I mean, Iraq is what is an easy thing to answer as a war we shouldn't have gone into now, and it was easy back then for anyone who's got their head on straight. But in the imperial core, uh, most people don't have their heads on straight, and so it was very much tussled at the time as to whether to go in on that. And I can understand why people might get on the wrong side of that stick if they've got Anglosphere police the world brain. It's just normal to them. I got no sympathy for it. I've got no empathy for it, but I can understand the logic that's driving their racism. Um, but it's going to be a hard pill to swallow. It's always a hard pill to swallow to say don't squash fascism, but that's not what's being said here. That's not what things should be equated to. Fascism should be squashed by the means of its own people. I mean, fuck me. If the German people had managed to squash Nazism before it ever got out of Germany, it'd have done us all some great favors. But the main point of this video is not to get too hooked up into the Ukrainian fascism. The point is that it's one thing for the third world, another thing for the first and the second world. You know, because they're always looking to rip off and mug off the second world too. But we see this with Iran and Iraq, two places to compare. Iran is a place that we've treated like dirt on the bottom of our shoe, just like Iraq. But with Iran, we go and make deals with what made us with on the same basis that we actually just invaded Iraq. Like we made deals with Iran on what we just went and invaded Iraq for, and Iraq wasn't even doing what we invaded them for. And Iran's only they're enriching uranium; they weren't making nukes, but even that is still steps ahead of what Iraq was being accused of regarding nuclear development, and nuclear development in Iraq was limited, if not none. Um, you know, and Iran is still mistreated in comparison to how we do this. Like, it's this staggered layer of how we deal with things. It reminds me of um the US and its way it staggered races within its own society. Do you know why Iran left the hostages for? The embassy staff. That's all fair game. So 1-2 America will always do though, because once they got what they want, they ain't gonna give in return. It's like when they were promised the DPRK. Um, what's it? During the Trump era, they were promising them a reduction in sanctions to for the Ukraine to disarm its nuclear project. Um, uh, uh, and the U.S. didn't bother removing any sanctions within the period of time that the DPRK had said was the time period it'll wait, and if it doesn't get its sanctions removed, it will just fuck off. And America didn't reduce the sanctions, so it left. And that would be the same thing with the way Iran operated. But they always do this. They pick certain countries to treat like primroses, and it always ends up being ones that they can ascribe the most amount of um uh, whiteness to, essentially Anglo-Saxon qualities. They try and find what they can what they can most easily imperialize. Um, and that's why Ukraine ends up falling into that pit, because it's within the Eurosphere. It's heavily dominated by Anglo-Imperialism. The US is an Anglo-Imperial power, let's be real. And modern imperialism itself bases itself off the Anglo-spherical model. I mean, the Russians are only playing by the books written by the Anglo-Saxons. China's been playing strictly from the Anglo-Saxon book when it comes to organizing its empire. It's the new rising empire, doing everything that the British and the Americans did, and some. Um, this is a big old war between two sides of the same coin. And if I'm to lay Lenin on the table here, we do not side with imperialist powers, nor west nor east. They're all dickheads in a big race to fuck each other. And the fact that we're treating Ukraine like it's something special when people have without a blink of an eye, and wars happen in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in what's the fucking name of the country near Ethiopia? Starts with an S. Oh, I've forgotten. It's Somalia. That's it. Somalia. Shit tons of countries in North Africa. Left, right, and center. I mean, there has been a war in Sudan as well, so it's good to mention them. But it was Somalia. Um, uh, now you're being coy. Um, uh, yeah. Without a blink of an eye, I mean the English and French deployments in North and Sub-Saharan Africa are completely announced to people. They don't even know. The only thing people know regarding North Africa ends up being the Libyan War. Yeah, I know South Sudan is a country, but the war in Sudan was with South Sudan, I do believe, or it was a civil. No, it was a civil war, and then South Sudan was formed to stop the civil war. I think that was what happened there. Um, I don't know. People say it's dangerous for me to think I say too many wrong things. Um, Thinky no good. Um, but all these wars happen without a blinking of an eye. But as soon as a war happens in a nation, it's European, and everyone's blowing their fucking tits off. it's all about fucking World War III this, World War III that, but no one's so concerned about World War III when they're going around ransacking third world countries all the time. And that's because when they're just ransacking third world countries, these nations are chill. They're all working together in it. I mean, China was one of the biggest donators to the war on terror, and Russia helped with the war on terror too. These people are they're not afraid because Ukraine being invaded is somehow drastically fucking this different thing. Although they're certainly treating it as such with all their racist perspectives being thrown over the top. The reason this is problematic is because all the white people aren't getting along anymore. The white people in the East aren't getting along with the white people in the West, which means that the imperialists now have rivals, and they don't like having rivals. They like the free ability to murder and genocide brown people and black people as much as they want and please. And when it comes to the point where they may end up having to fight another power as strong as them, that terrifies them. They love being able to fight countries that are in a poorer situation and don't have the military to fucking wield as heavy as a fist back. Although I would like to point out that regardless of that, the US has been getting its ass kicked in the third world. I mean, guerrilla fighters in West Asia have been punking the fuck out of the US over the last fucking 10 years. Afghanistan, from leaked reports that have come out later since, from the 2000s, because in the 2000s they used to tell us all sorts of bullshit that it was going great. We found out that ever since day one, there's been a catastrophe. There's nothing wrong with being wrong as long as you learn from your wronging. Well, I mean, it's best to be loud and wrong than be quiet and correct, because at least I'll know whether I'm wrong or right to learn from it. If you're just quiet about it, you'll never know whether you're right or wrong. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, World War III. So, as soon as it comes to a point where they're actually having to fight a military power of a country that has a similar size economy, a similar size amount of personnel available to be deployed in the military, with the same nutrition rates, the same, if not better, equipment. I mean, the military industry in Russia and China costs fucking shit tons less to supply and fund than the American one does. They're shitting themselves. They're having to fight themselves, essentially. It's not the same as when you go into countries that you've economically traumatized for decades before you even put a single boot on the ground, and then go and shoot at people that you've denied accessibility to necessary health equipment, that you've denied the accessibility to proper nutrition and food by bombing their fields and restricting trade from getting to them. You've prevented aid movements and shit from passing through there because it's not safe to deliver aid to them, or what other bullshit gets thrown in the air to prevent charitable aid and just plain aid in general getting to these regions. And that's without getting in the fact that on the side of charitable aid, as opposed to typical aid, charitable aid is profitized on. It might call itself non-profit, but people make a shit ton robbing people through charity. And I don't mean because they take money from people. I mean because they take money out of that to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds salaries for their board members. There's this, this they can't do to a superpower. They don't have the capacity to use the same old tactics. And many countries aren't even willing to sanction Russia for the US at the moment. Hegemony is becoming thin and slim, and rather than dealing with that problem head on, the people who run the cultural institutions of power, the labor aristocracy, the petty bourgeoisie, their notions of dealing with this is to divulge into racism. It's the only way they can do it, and they do it for this white man's guilt bullshit. And they apply this spin of, Oh, but they're so much like us. They dress like us. They drive like us. Look how civilized they are. They literally said those words. Like, even though I'm paraphrasing, they literally said those words in that context. I couldn't be fucking. It sounds like something you would hear from the early 20th century. Fucking CNN and all that. You fucking sent me the screenshot. They said those words in that context. Ukraine is our biggest supplier of grains. I mean, that sounds like the butt end of a joke about Ukraine grows corn, but given that Ukraine has a lot of fields, does not surprise me. Um, Slava Ukraine. Um, so I mean, it's the it's this stupid idea that give me the fucking grain. Well, what we're doing here is we're going against the grain. Not against the grain from Ukraine, but going against the grain, which is an old English term for Slava Ukraine. It's an old English term for uh, uh, going to the edge or pushing to the limit, or going through an arduous situation. It's not a term I've heard or used for a good part of a decade, but going against the grain. But yeah, no, they're clouding over what is impending World War conflict with as much racism as they can to take away from the fact that the reason why this is coming to exist, this conflict is arising, isn't because of the US empire all of a sudden being like, oh no, white people, got to do something about that. Because I mean, if Russia did this anywhere, they'd be willing to push, but it would less likely create a world war if it wasn't, you know, directly in a situation where the only response they can give is war. Because the US and Russia butt heads like this in Syria, and I mean, well, actually, there was a split in the US empire, and half of them wanted to go for outright policies that would start a war, whilst the rest wanted to tiptoe around it. That's the way to go about it. I mean, the West did set the situation up, um, and that's the position I have: is that the war, I'm against the Russians invading, but the West set this all up. Well, the West and Russia set this up, but the West started this shit. Like it's the ball is in their park, but they're using the racism to cover up the fact that the US has lost hegemonic control. Some of that you don't want the subjects of your empire having as their first thought in mind when they look at the current climate is that the US is lost its grip, which is 100% the case. The US has absolutely lost its grip on the world. It has a grip on its empire of what's still left on its side. It still has a fairly decent grip on Europe by the scenes of things with the well, that's unless Europe is playing its own game. But as far as things seem, the US still has a decent grip on those things. But it does not have a grip on Russia. It does not have a grip on China. It does not have a grip on prosperity of its imperialism in Africa. As in the last 10 years, West Asia. New grounds of change are occurring, and we're now seeing the big split occur between the imperials, in the imperial core. We don't know how the extensive this split's going to end. We don't know whether it's going to be just East versus West, or whether we're going to see the Western imperial powers squabble. Nonetheless, we're seeing a crumble of typical the typical international relationship relative to one that's in hegemonic position of imperial power. A hegemonic imperial power has no equal when it comes to their capacity to operate as an imperial power. That's no longer the case for America. Its military and its socioeconomics are matched, if are matchable, if not matched. And now we're seeing a point where the conflict's rising up. And to reiterate what I read from the comments last on from Bala Boy, quote, our resistance forces don't support the war and blame the West for the war, especially America, end quote. I mean, there is some nuance. I mean, Russia does have a very big part to blame in the situation, but it's the two sides of the same stick in this situation. It comes to the point that Lenin made. There's no good imperialists, and they're sort of making the good point. The resistance forces getting at that they're against the war, they're against the imperialist action, but they see that the core center of this specific issue does come from the U.S. But it's absolutely beyond belief, and I mean it was something that certainly needed to be grappled with in regard to discussing just sort of the issues of the pro-US side, as I sort of wanted to do a corresponding video that relates to what Darks and Gengaris and I was on the stream later on got into from the criticizing the pro-Russia side. So there's a bit more of a balance, because if we're taking the balanced position, we got to commit to the balanced position. But then, I didn't have any video planned, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to get it out, until later on in the week, where I was going to get Gangeros to sort of help me out with it a bit. But Third World Comrade come to me with a very good concern, a very important concern, from the Middle Eastern perspective regarding this issue, the Fertile Crescent, and that sort of sparked a sense of urgency for this video, because this is an urgent time, and as they had said, but I didn't need them to tell me. But I hadn't even properly sort of considered this. Like, what I mean by that, I scramble to say, is I've been seeing this, but had not even really taken it into account. And actually, it's funny that you say that just as I'm about to say it. The reason I did this so soon was because, and I should have noticed this, considering that it was plain and obvious to see. No one is getting out the word of the third world on this. Everyone is just talking first world shit between each other. They're completely putting their barriers up. So when an Arab brother comes and he's saying, there's commences, journalist organizations are saying this, people in the people in general are looking at this, and they've got a slanted face to it. They don't know what to fucking, they don't know what to think other than, wow, what a bunch of dehumanizing racists who don't have a fucking fickle of a thought of empathy for our struggle, but have all this love, and all of a sudden for what's gone on in Ukraine. It's utter blindness, and love and respect to that compliment. Being a comrade of the third world is an honor. Some of I gotta not take for granted, and requires a commitment. And when third world people come to me with issues, I like to get it out as quick as possible. I'm the same with fourth world people. I always try and do a within 24-hour policy when something's brought to me that's urgent. That's why a lot of the time, whenever the Navajo have given me a task to do. It normally comes within an hour or two of me having the task given me. It's a process of ensuring that not my disabilities and downfall doesn't get in the way of producing the product, because things can easily get stuck on back burner. I mean, I've still been meaning to make a video regarding ableism and the issues regarding that in Marxism. Um, but it was paramount that this got out there. You know, as soon as it was told to me, it clicked. It clicked. It's like should have seen this from a mile off, but I'm not of the third world position, so sorry, I'm not in the third world position, so I wouldn't have the experience to act on it so quickly to see this and instantly notice. I like everyone else got swept up in the fact that of the different arguments that are being discussed and trying to assess to it. So when he mentioned it, it clicked straight away. I was like, no, absolutely, that it's mental that no one is blinking an eye at Wagwan in the third world. I mean, me and Dark Sonovia did go on about a bit regarding the hypocrisy of the West and regarding this, but we never got onto it from the details regarding the disrespect and disgust it brings around the world. And as you can see, I'm not the best at reaching an end point as to what I'm trying to say. This conflict cannot be devoided from the decades upon decades upon decades of conflict that people longer than I've lived and people who have lived so long that they've died of old age have been seeing. That this needs to be relative and relevant to the growing nature and developments of imperialism. And people must come into understanding of what occurs when imperial hegemony is lost and these imperialist powers start tussling it for each other. Anyone who tries to cite this as something special or something different because it's war in Europe, other than stating that it is at least the only differentiating factor is Europe is getting to taste war on its own continent. But even that is only rare McGubbin when it's in an oppressed sector of Europe. To differentiate this from what we've done around the world in the Middle East is wrong. And to criticize Russia and to not criticize the US or to not criticize the UK or to not criticize the EU is to be a hypocrite, for one. And whether they think they're being racist or not, they are being racist. Because to show an ignorant towards war in brown country that you don't show to war in white country, racist. Yeah, and bombing fucking Serbia. I mean, we did the same thing during the war in Serbia as well. I mean, it was treated in this disgusting manner. I mean, the war in Yugoslavia was very very weird because it was essentially um we were essentially siding with no one at one point. Like like we were funneling and funding so many different groups and targeting so many different people against each other. I would akin the Yugoslavia incident to be much more similar. um Hypocrisy within hypocrisy, absolutely. I would akin it to the actions of people like Lawrence of Arabia, where they've manipulated so many different groups it's hard to even pinpoint where the manipulation starts. But what's it it's beyond disgusting. The way in which people in the Western imperial core are operating because of Eastern imperialism. It's like the serpent eating the other serpent that's eating it. Yeah, Ouroboros. Um, Bosnia almost became Iran's buddy. Yeah, I bet that spooked the Yanks a bit. It's it's one thing that as well though, like we've not just got the fact of Western imperialism taking along this. Of course they deploy Al Qaeda, the fucking go to. Yeah, it would not surprise me. Um, that's why it's so like complicated. Like there is no one side because like the U.S. supports terrorism against Bosnians. They support Bosnians against Serbians. They supported fucking uh um what's it? But the brain fart. The fact that we not just have people in the Imperial Core going about this, the Muslim Brotherhood is gonna go support Ukraine. No surprise that the British led organization, or well, British founded organization, I don't know whether they're still led by the Brits, is gonna go and support into Ukraine. Turkey using their mercs again, like in Armenia and Syria. Turkey getting big for their boots, as Net would put it. Well, it's an English saying, so as I would put Net's thoughts on the matter. Um, Inter-imperialism, as it be, will take any advantage it can during an imperial conflict to gain as much power as it can to be the most advantageous ally with for its region. The selling out done to imperial powers, but we're not just seeing this this abhorrent racism within this conflict and this ignorant hypocrisy from just outright pro Russia or pro US people innately within these regions. I mean, we're seeing this behavior from supposed communists and socialists. That's the real thing people need to really see here. Now, it's understandable that someone who doesn't follow Lenin's imperialism and all that, Waha, might not have these positions, but I don't find that to be true because most people I know who are very solid on their position are against the war outright and they're not Marxists. So I find that would be a chauvinistic position. But regardless, there are even people who call themselves Marxists that are not taking heed on Lenin's words as an imperialism. They are treating geopolitics like a game of fucking they're treating it like a fucking game of supremacy, not a game of chess. If it's a game of chess, you would think, okay, advancing my enemy, because if we look at geopolitics as a game of chess, it's not this imperialist, that imperialist on either side of the chessboard. I need to remember the camera's there. I'm on this screen over there. This it's imperialism versus the imperialized and the anti-imperialists, the socialists and whatnot. You're not going to win in any direction by having an imperialist take over another imperialist territory. It doesn't weaken the imperialists. It just changes whom is the primary imperialist. Having imperialists fight can weaken the imperialists, but because they're contesting an area doesn't mean they'll always fight. Um, you know, and cheering. So if you were to be cheering against both imperial powers and trying to fight against both imperial powers, regardless of the fact that they are fighting, they will get fucked harder. They will struggle. They're not going to work together. They have distinctly chosen not to and are trying to push their imperial agendas against each other. If you just side with one or the other, you push to make that other one more powerful off the back of the power of the prior one. And we live in a very we live in a world of dialectics where everything interacts with everything. You know, if something is building up off of the basis um the of shit, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, cheering up a nation off the basis is going to weaken the other. Oh yeah, no. So if someone's coming off of the backbone of the prior empire, they gain the power of that empire to a great degree. The U.S. wrote off a lot of the basis already built by the British Empire. China is developed by a lot of what the British and the American Empire have developed. That's imperialism. It constantly adds new ways of doing things on top of the old ways to band-aids the system, but it's still all in all very rigid sort of structure. It's only flexible in the sense that it can add new contradictions to try and suppress older contradictions. If you end up supporting one or the other, you push the ball into the other's camp, and they get to throw the ball the next game. They get to control how the serve is led. Um, the you take the Lenin position. You support the people in a struggle against the imperial power. It's always been the process. You know, and I am somewhat going around in circles at this point. So I will, just to save fucking scaring people off of any longer of a video watch time, or me somehow ruining the salience of my points, or having these bouts of forgetfulness I keep having. And I will say, adios. It was great speaking with yous on this issue. Horrible issue to have to be speaking on, but at least we're getting the voice out. The Our brothers and sisters have been getting massacred non-stop my entire life in the Middle East and North Africa. My entire life by imperialism. Seriously, keep that in mind. How long have they been killing white people compared to how long they've been killing brown and black people? And now think of how insulted these people must feel. That we have showed fuck all the care in the world for them. But now everyone is rushing to wave Ukrainian flags. Listen, they can get fined for waving Palestinian flags. So really, seriously, keep that in mind coming out of this video. Love, respect, and solidarity to all of yous, especially my third world comrades in the deep and arduous struggle that has been bereft upon you by imperialism. Seemingly civilized, seemingly European. Absolute love, respect, and solidarity to all of y'all, especially my third world brothers and sisters in arduous struggle. Red salute, and I'll catch yous next time. Respect.